installation standards. How do we ensure that now that we've chosen the best materials, that we get the best start for our healthy trees? Well, again, there's ANSI standards. There is a large volume of tree care operations. The tree installation part of it, tree transplanting part of it, is part 6. There is then a matching companion piece from the International Society of Arboriculture called Best Management Practices. So one is sort of the theory and the other is sort of the practice, if you will. Those are very good, and there are a lot of cities now that adopt those as part of their standards. These are reviewed and updated every 3 years. By adopting them as documents, cities don't have to reapprove their ordinances and policies. They can just go with the updated, revised standards. Again, inspection. If you have adopted standards, then you need to make sure that people are following them. That's where inspection comes. And then you need to enforce those standards and to ensure that everyone is following them consistently. Maintenance standards. Okay, now we've chosen the best materials. We've installed them properly. How do we take care of them? These are a valuable city asset. In some cities, $2.5 million worth of valuable city assets. It's worth putting some time and effort into taking care of them properly. And once again, ANSI rises to the occasion with the pruning and tree care standards manual, and ISA has a companion best management practices manual again too. Again, inspection. If you have city staff doing pruning or other tree care, if you have hired contractors doing the tree care, regular inspection to make sure that they're following the standards and following your specifications is important, and then an enforcement piece again. Asset management usually starts with an inventory. Do you know what you have? Do you know what it's worth? Inventory is probably the most powerful tool in an urban forestry program. The inventory tells you what you have. It tells you what's doing well for you so that you can perhaps look at planting more of those. It tells you what's not doing well so that you can avoid planting those. It tells you what things need care now. It helps you prioritize the work plan for your staff. It helps you build a budget. So we're looking at this and we've got these priority items that need to be done. We have identified 12 trees that are completely hazardous that need to be removed. We can start building a budget. We can start talking about the needs that we have relative to taking care of our trees and managing this valuable asset. It also helps us look at ways to enhance that asset and make it more valuable to the city overall. ISA has a best management practices manual concerning tree inventories. At the state level right now, there is a community assistance forestry grant available specifically for inventories. So if you are already working for a local jurisdiction that might be interested in having an inventory completed for them as part of their management planning citywide, please contact Lyndon Lampman at DNR. She'd be happy to get you started on that. The inventory determines priorities and scheduled work, helps you kind of play that out, helps you talk to your staff about what needs to happen next, timing, scheduling, budgeting. It has to be kept current, however, to be effective. An inventory is a snapshot in time. In order to keep it current enough to be useful, you have to keep updating it. This can be done in a variety of ways. Nowadays, we have very good software that can be used for this purpose. And some of it even comes with work order plans that help incorporate all of the stuff that's done through work orders back into the inventory so it's always completely updated. The work plan and assigned staff. So now you know what to do, but who's going to do it? And when should those tasks be done so that they fit with the staff schedule or your contractor schedule, fit with your budgeting process, fit with the best management plan or best management practices for the trees themselves. The best time to do structural pruning of young trees, for instance, is right now. particularly for young deciduous trees, because you can actually see the structure. You can see where you got a wonky branch or a broken branch, or you can see that the canopy needs to be lifted or the leader needs to be identified. Right now is a great time for that. Removing trees sometimes is best done again after the leaves are gone so that there's a little bit less mess to tidy up. Pruning for clearance, at sign clearance, and pedestrian clearance over sidewalks may be best done during the summer. It kind of depends on what works best for the trees in conjunction with what works best for your staff. Regular inspections can help you identify some of those problem areas and incorporate them into the work plan. Regular pruning cycles help you regularize that tree care so it makes it easy to plan on, easy to budget for. Priority tasks, again, called out by your inventory, can be scheduled. Your field staff can all be trained in basic tasks. This is the work that I do. I work with small communities to help them incorporate good urban forestry principles and practices into their everyday work plans. I train staff. I train the park staff. I train the downtown ambassadors. I train the public works street staff how to use a pair of hand pruners properly. As they're walking down the street, even the meter maid, the water meter reader, she's got a pair of hand pruners. When she's reading meters, if she sees a broken twig, a broken branch, she can take care of it. It takes her an extra 10 seconds, and it's done. It's not a hazard to somebody who's walking by, poking them in the eye. It's taken care of. Nobody else needs to take their valuable time to drive all the way to that location, remove the branch, and drive back again. It seems to be very effective and efficient. So that, again, that gets back to the basic ongoing maintenance fully integrated into the city's work program, regular work programming. Budget. So now, we know we want to do this. How do we pay for the trees and their care? It's not effective to plant trees without also planning for their care. This has become a key element in our community assistance forestry grant applications when we ask for those at the state level. When we work with cities, as they're applying for grants, they also must give us a maintenance and management care plan for the next 3 years. We get a lot of plans. We're going to plant so many trees. Great. How are you going to take care of them? Long pause. Part of my job then is to help them figure that out. So, it helps to assign a value to tree-based services. All of those benefits and services that we talked about at the very beginning have a dollar value. Dr. Greg McPherson down at University of California, Davis has done extensive work on how to assign those values in a way that makes sense. He has come up with regional guidelines, and they are now incorporated into the iTree suite of software packages that allows a city to plug in their inventory, and out the other end comes a value, a dollar value for your trees, what they do for your city. That's very powerful. Now you have a dollar value asset that you're managing, just like your bank account. One of the most powerful things that Eugene, Oregon ever did was look at that. What they found was that for every dollar they invested in trees, they got $3.15 back in value. That's better than passbook savings accounts. Good investment. Okay. But you have to know the value to be able to get that story. Another tool that's worked very well for a lot of local governments is to develop a tree fund that accumulates tree-related fines and fees in lieu of. For instance, in a development situation, if a developer is not able to plant sufficient trees to mitigate for the trees that are removed, in many instances they are allowed to pay a fee in lieu of their mitigation. Tree-related fines may be vandalism, malicious or otherwise. It may be illegal tree removals. There are a series of different avenues there. Those can all go into a tree fund that then helps pay for tree programming. Many cities are now looking at stormwater utility funds, since, as I think I pointed out earlier, we're starting to look at trees in terms of their utility for stormwater management. That then brings up another valuable venue for accumulating some funding. Stormwater utility fee. Makes perfect sense if in fact you're managing your urban forest for stormwater management and that sort of utility. Grants are a valuable resource to develop programming and urban forestry tools, management tools. Grants will not help you with day-to-day budget issues, but they can help you develop programming pieces, such as the inventory or an urban forestry management plan. There are grants available for both of those items. There are also grants available to help you incorporate policies and procedures into existing comprehensive planning. There's a lot of tools that are available through grants that are sort of non-traditional. HUD has a series of grants for livable and walkable communities. Trees are a big part of that. Trees can definitely be the focus of a grant application in that regard. Even things as odd as Trout Unlimited. I'm managing a grant right now where we are reforesting a stream corridor in the middle of the city that is seaborne trout habitat. I was kind of intrigued by the idea. They applied for the grant and they got it. It's a really non-traditional way of looking at finding those funding resources, thinking about the services and benefits that you accrue from your trees and ways that you can look at pulling in non-traditional funding sources. And then grants for special projects. Many of the public works grants available through the Department of Commerce can again be tree focused, particularly if you're looking at stormwater management. So we've gone through some of those ways of looking at urban forestry planning as if it were infrastructure planning. But what can we do right now? Those are all kind of things that have to be built into and worked up to, but what can we do right now? What we can do right now is look at every individual plan that crosses our desk in terms of its capacity to foster trees in a healthy way. So I developed this 10-point plan review checklist. It's on the back page of your handout so that you can take it away and use it yourself. Please, please, please. And add to it. And if you do add to it, I want to hear about it, please, because this is definitely a work in progress. But these are some of the key points that I look for when I review a plan that have helped me in terms of thinking about incorporating trees in a very wise fashion. So we'll look at above ground utilities, below ground, safety signage, line of sight, commercial and retail signage, distance from buildings, aerial space, space for tree trunks and roots, soils and compaction, and, very key, appropriate tree species and cultivars. So, in more detail, this is your typical plan. You get this in, it's very nice. This is a planting and landscape plan. Do you see anything about awnings? Do you see any utilities? Do you see any signs? I want to know where all those things are before I start looking at where the trees are. So here's your grading and utility plan. What I've done recently is ask the developer when he brings in the permit package to have one sheet that incorporates all of that stuff on one sheet. You can do that much easier now that most of this is done with CAD software. It's very easy for them to put the layers together and give it to you all in one sheet. That makes your plan review so much easier. So if you have the capacity to ask for that, that's a really good place to start. So, above ground utilities. Power lines, oh boy. So what you see a lot are pruning jobs like this. Or like this. I love this one. Now, there are a few things we have to bear in mind. There is Washington State code that requires every utility, whether public or private, to provide for the safe and uninterrupted delivery of service. If they do not do so, they are subject to very, very large fines. Thus, the pruning job. In that case, then we need to pay attention to what overhead utilities already exist when we look at a plan. You can't do that if you don't know where they are. So look for that. If they're not on the plan, either go visit the site or ask for the developer to bring you a plan that shows you where the above ground utilities are so you can take that into account. Very important. You can plan appropriately if you know where stuff is. Proper prior planning. You guys probably have heard that one forever and ever and ever. This is not sustainable pruning. It's certainly not aesthetically pleasing. I can barely tell that those are even trees. And this is hugely expensive. If your utility has to come in on a 4-year pruning cycle, which is typical in cities, and prune to this extent, the rates are going to go up, guaranteed, because this is expensive. It's expensive to prune around all of those lines. You can see the lines go right through the middle of the tree. A much better choice would have been a smaller tree here. I'm not generally in favor of small trees in cities. I think we get more bang for the buck out of big trees. I like big trees. But there are certain occasions where those are just the most appropriate. These happen to be sycamores, and they have been whacked on for so long that they actually don't send out much in the way of greenery. They'll be dead in a couple of years, and then the city will have the additional expense of removing them at about $2,000 per tree. Not good management. Not good management at all. This is from Pacific Power, and it's an illustration that they give to show what they like to see in terms of some of the safety clearances for large-sized trees. So you see that they've very clearly laid out how that can look, the progression of sizes of trees as you move a little bit farther away from the power lines. This is really important because every year in the state of Washington alone, at least 2 arborists are killed pruning trees near power lines. And those are totally preventable deaths if we pay attention to where we plant trees in the first place. Right tree, right place. This is sort of my mantra, and you'll see it one more time. So next we have below ground utilities. There's water, there's sewer, there's underground power, there's gas. Communication lines may be buried as well as above ground. And one thing that none of us ever really think about are water lines for fire plugs, which are typically not part of your public water system. The easiest way to deal with those, to know where they are, if they're not on the plan, call the Underground Utilities Locate Center. It's a free call. It takes them about 2 days to come out and mark a location. There are some really interesting things that happen. This tree, the big root that you can see sort of on the right-hand side, the root there is about 4 inches in diameter. The bundle of utilities below it is about also 4 inches in diameter. And when that tree had to be removed, they had a really difficult time because, as you can see, the utilities are right there. They couldn't pull the stump out. They couldn't grind the stump out. It was kind of a mess. This is a water meter. You can't see it any longer very well, but there was a concrete casing around it. And this was a red maple, and the roots grew right around the box. When they pulled the concrete out, there was actually a perfectly formed box of tree roots. It was pretty amazing. This was the public works staff in Olympia who called me and said, "Oh, you gotta come see this. This is so cool." And it was pretty cool, I have to admit. But the placement of both of these trees were right directly on top of the underground utilities. Again, with a little proper planning and a little forethought, they could have been moved far enough away from those utilities that they wouldn't have created quite so much of a conflict. I will add, by the way, that this water meter was leaking, and it was not leaking because of the tree. It was leaking because it froze. And that was a message that I had to point out to the public works guys when I got there, because they were like, "Well, you know, it's probably tree roots." And I said, "No, it's not. Look, it's freeze damage. You can see it." I'm like, "Ah." tall. So safety signage. Can you actually see the sign in this picture? Can you find the sign? There's a sign in there. Yeah. I can't even really tell what it says because it's completely obliterated by the tree. This is a safety issue. This does need to be addressed. This is one of those clearance issues that I was referring to when somebody has just a pair of pruners with them and they see a situation, they can take care of it immediately. Stop signs, big issue. Sometimes you can plant far enough away that you don't have that problem. Most of the time, it's a pruning issue. It needs to be addressed on a regular basis. This is a huge safety issue. People have to be able to see the safety signage. This is really not. This is not. Line of sight is also a safety issue. You need to be able to see as you're going around corners. You need to be able to see as you exit driveways and enter driveways. This tree, I would never have allowed on this corner. It's way too close to the corner. As this tree grows, it's going to block a significant portion, a very critical safety portion of this corner. Right here's a pedestrian way. This is an unsafe situation. When you look at a plan, you establish the sight lines like this. And in this particular plan, you can see that the trees are actually outside that line of sight triangle. This is really important to check on a plan. Many plans will come in with trees planted right up to the corners. This is also an issue if you're in a commercial, if this is a commercial or a warehousing type development. Again, a lot of the plans will come in with trees like right here. A semi is not going to make way for a tree, and the tree will lose that fight. We see that all the time in warehousing districts. Much better plan to offset the trees out of danger and maintain that clear line of sight for the trucks and also for other people using that area. Commercial and retail signs. You know, a lot of, again, it's planning. Think about what this is going to look like when these two small trees leaf out right across the front of the sign. Right across the front of the sign. Wow. A different choice of tree, or even trees on either side of that entryway, would have made much more sense in terms of framing that commercial or that retail outlet and not obstructing the sign. In a lot of cases, like in McMinnville, where this picture was taken, the trees actually do a really wonderful thing. They provide nice patterning on the streets, very pleasant. I love to go there and just stroll around. And your line of sight is right into the store. Right into the store. Where is your eye directed? That canopy brings you right into the window. Same thing down here. The window is clear, you look right into the window, and all of this up here is just a nice shady spot. Same thing here. Your eye is directed right into the window of that shop. Ideally, that's what we'd like to see. Big trees that direct your eye right into those commercial and retail locations. Now, this does take a little bit of flexibility with the sign code and working with your local business districts at the beginning, because trees start small. And there's an awkward teenage stage there where they're going to undoubtedly block someone's view. If people can just be patient and wait through that time, then you have this beautiful effect afterwards. I see it all the time in shopping malls where they trim their trees into little round pools. When I drive by, I can't even see the signs for the shops. I know that they're trying to create a clear line of sight so that you see all of their advertising, but instead what they've actually done is actively blocked it. So somehow, again, there's a message we need to get through to business owners about correct pruning practices to properly frame their stores. Distance from buildings. Okay, so here we have a sequoia planted way too close. There's about 6 inches between the trunk of this tree and the balcony. This is a really bad situation because sequoias are very, very powerful trees, and the balcony will lose this battle. So here's a lovely tree that will be removed because it's growing into the house. And it's not even an issue with the roots. It's an issue with the trunk and the rest of the tree. Again, pretty close to the house. This is a deodar cedar. These want to be extremely big trees, and it's not going to be very long before the trunk actually meets the porch here. Way too close. I can't tell you how many times that I go out just roaming in neighborhoods, and someone will have a gorgeous tree. It's really big, and it's planted right in front of the living room bay window, and it's about 2 feet from the house. I don't get that. It's way too close to the house, and it's right in the middle of your window. You can't see anything around it because it's all tree. But pay attention to how close the trees are to the building. That's really important. And here, when we're looking at a plan like this, I see these trees, and when I look at the tree list, these are a little close. They could be moved out about 6 feet, and they will not then cause a problem. So I might talk to the developer and the landscape architect about that. These trees, way too close to the building. These either need to be changed out to shrubs, they need to be changed to a different species that is very narrow and upright growing, or they just need to go away altogether, or something like that. These trees, nicely chosen, however, there's a window here. Do we really want a tree in front of that window? And here's a tree again, nicely chosen little tree, very beautiful little tree. It's got a sidewalk here, it's got a window here. There might be a better choice, either a tree or a different placement for that tree. One way to avoid planting too close, the organization Building Green has come up with some guidelines about looking at zones around the house or around a building that are tree-free, is what they refer to it. And that ensures that the trees then do not grow into the house and cause damage or need severe pruning to not scratch paint and that sort of thing. Aerial space for tree canopy development. We get the best benefit out of trees when they're allowed to develop to their fullest potential, and that means both above ground in terms of their canopy and below ground in terms of their roots. Here again, we have trees planted way too close to a building, and so about half of the canopy is not even effective. As a matter of fact, it's been removed because it was growing into the side of the building, so it was removed. Not enough space for those trees to develop to their full potential. On the other hand, here we have some illustrations of trees that have been planted far enough away from buildings and with sufficient root space that they are beautifully developed. I'd love to find this whole picture. This is just a small excerpt of a picture that I received from a friend, and the rest of it was unfortunately destroyed. But these are beautiful big trees. They provide a lovely canopy over this, and again, a direct line of sight right into the retail businesses. Same thing here. We have nice big canopies, direct line of sight right into the businesses next door. But fully developed canopies, they aren't squished. They haven't been pruned severely because they're growing into something that they shouldn't be. So good planning job there. They really thought about where the trees would be best placed. Right tree, right place, it gets back to us all the time. Space for tree trunks and roots. We talk so many times about sidewalk damage and curb damage and street damage from roots. It's not just roots. Trunks are massive and they're very powerful. This is a copper beech. This is a 3x3 cutout. It's pretty completely filled with that cutout. A little bit of root lift here, but really the damage is going to be from this trunk just continuing to expand. Trunks need space too. Trees grow. This is the hardest concept for engineers to grasp. Trees grow over time. They keep telling me, just give me a formula. There is no formula. Just like all of us, trees are individuals. They grow at different rates. We can make sort of some general statements about their growth habits and growth forms and growth rates, but they're all individuals. We just need to think about giving them space. This is a 2x2 cutout. The tree roots did not break the sidewalk. Instead, what they did was form this little berm. The tree roots are about this high above the cutout. The sidewalk is perfectly intact. The tree, however, is really, really struggling, and there's this huge berm of tree roots right there. It's a huge trip hazard, and that tree now has been removed, which is unfortunate. It's a beautiful tree. Again, trees that get way too big for their locations and start lifting sidewalk panels. These again are not root issues. This is the trunk actually growing out. Now, it's not just trees that lift sidewalks. This is a guy line for a utility pole. This is a 4-inch gap right there underneath the sidewalk. So it's not just trees that do this. That's a trip hazard. There's some options to explore for creating different kinds of space for tree roots to grow into. There's permeable pavements, there's structural soils, there's silvicels. This is a silvicel installation that was done in Seattle by the Seattle Department of Transportation. Silvicels are a polycarbon honeycomb structure that is then filled with soil. That way it is not compact, and it isolates utilities from, from the tree roots, and gives the tree roots space to grow. It's pretty new. It's only been out for about 3 years. Seattle and Lake Forest Park, I think, are the only places I'm aware of that have been installed for some period of time. So we're still kind of waiting to see how successful that is. Thank you, Morris. But it looks like it could be a pretty nifty way to get around some of the compaction issues that we have that force roots to the surface.
Excuse me, what is the estimated lifespan on this?
On the silvicels?
Yeah, because
we don't know for sure yet. They're saying it's a permanent installation, but as I say, they really have only hit the market in about the last 3 years, so we don't have a lot of good information on them yet.
One of the things the developers that I hear feedback from is that the permeable pavements, are expensive because they're having to be replaced quite often. You know, they have a very short lifespan, so they're finding that the expense in that is.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that too, and I'm trying to get a study organized on that so we can actually put some hard numbers to that. Anecdotally, I would say that they're probably pretty close to right. I see either structural soils or silvicels or my last alternative, audacious design, as being actually stronger alternatives. But certainly for some applications, permeable pavements, I think, have some merit for consideration. Yes. The problem that we found in Olympia and Lacey is that we grow so much moss over the winter that the pore spaces get clogged.
I see.
So then we have the expense of rotor-rootering them every spring. So that's an issue, and that's something to take into consideration. In some areas down in the desert Southwest, in Albuquerque, permeable pavements are a godsend to them. Okay. Because they don't have moss.
It's a climate difference.
It's a climate difference.
They do absorb the water, they do that effect.
Yes.
It's just the lifespan of them.
Yes.
And like you're saying, maybe environment.
Yeah. Because the other thing that Greg McPherson has noticed about permeable asphalt at any rate is that it does not volatilize as readily under trees, so you don't lose it as quickly. It doesn't solarize and get damaged as quickly as it would without the trees over it, so it's a good partnership to have the trees with the permeable pavement in that regard. Again, he's working in Southern California. So that's always something, when you read research, that's also a good point to bear in mind. Where are they doing it, doing the mass of their research? Because that can make a big impact on its applicability to local circumstances. As I said, my favorite is audacious design. I would like to see really cool, interesting things done with planting spaces for trees in truly multimodal transportation and design work. And we've seen some. but not enough. I want to see something really outrageous out there. I want to be part of it. So if you come up with something really audacious, let me know. I want to help. This is what I'm talking about with roots perching on the surface due to compaction. Roots need air, and they will only go as deep as there is air. So when you have a waterlogged park, like some of the waterfront parks tend to have a very high water table, roots actually won't go down. They'll stay right on the surface. If soils are compacted, same thing. No air can get into the soil. Roots will not go where there's no air. So they'll stay right at the surface like this. This is a trip hazard. It's terrible to mow around. Your park staff hate you. And this is a prime candidate for broken sidewalks if there's any in the vicinity. Pedestrian traffic is a huge compaction agent. And this is an area that they've actually walked the bricks down into the underlying subsoil. And you can actually see how it's started impacting this tree. It's destabilized the root system enough that the tree is leaning. Again, options to explore are permeable pavement, structural soils, silvisols. This is an illustration of structural soils. Has anybody heard of that? Is this a new term? Structural soils were developed by Dr. Nina Basic back in Cornell University, and it involves an engineered soil comprised of gravel, actual soil, and a sticking agent. The idea is that by engineering the soil, you can actually have a load-bearing soil that is not compacted beyond the capacity of roots to penetrate it. It's very intriguing. We've had several of these projects throughout the state, and they seem to be doing very well. The very first structural soil in the nation was installed about 25 years ago. We're just now getting sort of the long-term results of that. Seems to be pretty good. They're finding a little bit of root heaving as the roots get too big for the spaces. However, the other part that they're finding is that the gravel is actually breaking down over time to create larger pore spaces for roots. So there's sort of a balance there of the soil, or the rock becoming soil and the roots getting larger. It seems to work very successfully in the Puget Sound area. There's probably 40 or 50 projects using structural soils. It again is one option to consider when you're trying to install a large tree in a constrained space. It gives more root area for that tree to spread out into. Oh, inappropriate tree species in cultivar. This poor little palm tree. This was 2 years ago in my marina. It was a very sad, sick little tree, set of trees. And they actually lost all of their palms the next summer because they were so disgusted with the situation. It takes some practice to know what's appropriate for the soils in your location and the climate. This is a good place to get professional assistance if you need it. It's also a really fun way to learn more about trees. I've learned so much about trees, and I'm always so amazed at what works in one location and really isn't happy in another location. Between Seattle and Olympia, it's only about 65 miles. And yet there are trees that flourish in Seattle that we can't get to grow in Olympia. Conversely, there are trees that we go to time after time in Olympia because they work so well in our soils and our climate. In Vancouver, they wouldn't have them on a bed. They don't work for us, we don't like them, they get every disease known to mankind. We're not all that far apart, and you'd think that our circumstances will not be that different, but they are. It pays to pay attention as you drive through your city to see what looks fabulous. Wow, look at that tree. I wonder what it is. Find out. That looks like a good tree to keep in mind as you start developing your own plant palette. Right tree, right place. Pay attention to the climate, the soils, the size, all of the things that we've talked about. So here again, all of those 10 points. As I say, if you come up with others, please let me know. These are the ones that were important to me as I was doing plan review. As a result of all of this work, you get lovely landscapes. really great public spaces, just wonderful places to hang out. And you have happy trees and happy communities. So, thank you.